Hi, I'm Mark Honeybone from Property Ventures, and welcome to our weekly podcast where we interview prominent members of the investment community along with other professionals in the New Zealand property market. This is a free service from Property Ventures so that you can keep current and learn from some of the best around New Zealand. To check us out, take a look at propertyventures.co.nz. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Hi and welcome back to another podcast. A lot of people are out there trying to get cash flow, and they're trying to think of different ways they can get cash flow. Some people are out there want that high capital gains place. They want to have a place by the beach to get that capital gains over the next property cycle. But how do they get cash flow? Does it sit there empty and not get any cash flow at all? So you have to fork out $40,000 or $50,000 a year. Well, that's what today's about. We're going to talk to Rich Carey from Batch Care. And what that is just another way of getting cash flow for a property. So you furnish your place, you rent it out, and you might get someone there one night a week, you might get someone there all week. And the peak periods, you might get some obscene amounts of rent for a night's rent. So I'll try to ask the right questions for you listeners out there and see what we can learn about this opportunity or to do something different with property. So we hope you enjoy the show. So welcome to the show today, Rich.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's great to be here and to chat to your listeners.
Good stuff. So the listeners know who you are. Tell us briefly about Rich Carey, and also then more important, so I shouldn't say more importantly, but tell us about Batch Care.
Yeah, so I mean, my role here at Batch Care is head of marketing. I've been with Batch Care for the last 4 years. Batch Care as a business was founded back in 2004, so we've got over a decade's experience managing short-term rentals around the country for lots of busy holiday homeowners, both here and abroad.
We started overseas.
Here and overseas, okay. Correct. So I guess we're a full-service holiday home rental management company, so many of you will be familiar with the likes of Airbnb or Book a Batch, which are very much DIY platforms where owners engage directly with guests. We take care of all that on the owner's behalf. So owners that are looking to access short-term returns but not necessarily deal with the ins and outs of managing it on a daily basis, that's where we step in.
Great. Okay, so that's a sort of subtle difference already where you look after a lot of the stuff that the others don't do. And a minute into the podcast, I've already learned something. You're doing overseas as well, or manage your sort of properties. Just what sort of just.
Sorry. So our owners are based overseas.
Okay.
We're still domestically based, but I mean we started with 5 properties in Hahei in the Coromandel in 2004, and now we've got over 1,300 right throughout the country. So. They're serviced by a great network of 75 and growing property managers around the country.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Great. We'll probably talk about those property managers in a wee while and how they act and do their thing. So obviously 2004 you started, and that must have been when, I guess, this started around New Zealand anyway. So what's the major changes you've seen in the last, 12 years?
Yeah, so I suppose I can comment specifically on the last 4 of those, but I suppose there's been a fair few in that amount of time. I mean, just going back a decade, it was pretty common to pick up your local trader or your local newspaper, and it was a text-only ad for a nice little 3-beddy down in Whitianga or Whangamata with a price and a phone number, and that's how Kiwis went about renting their batches. It was very much a cottage industry. It was a very, embedded in the Kiwi psyche. She'll be right, go away to the batch, key under the mat, away you go. And I guess what's happened over that time, and particularly in the last couple of years with bigger companies, the likes of the Airbnb, putting a lot more attention onto our industry, I guess, is that it's changed the way people travel and also the expectations of those guests. And through companies like ourselves that not only provide the property for rent, but also take care of it and are on site in the local area should any issues arise to be able to rectify those. It's much more of a full-service nature. It's much more of a hotel experience.
Yeah, and that's common overseas too, around Europe, isn't it?
Oh, completely. I mean, now, through companies like us, you're talking commercial linen and cleaning options for guests, instant online booking, real-time availability online. So the whole process has become a lot more sophisticated, and that's what guests expect now.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of the guests are from overseas and they expect that. I suppose it's like an experience of staying. It's like a hotel experience, but at a bigger room. You got your own house and quite often own views and.
That's exactly it. And I suppose both domestically and internationally, group travel now is extremely popular. Family travel, it always has been, but people certainly perhaps looking for a little bit more space, a little bit more of an ability to self-cater, and perhaps spend a few more of their hard-earned dollars out there on the local tourism activities rather than simply eating out in restaurants or cafes. That's got a lot of appeal for people, laundry facilities, things like that.
Absolutely, for a family of 4 or 5 or 6, you can save a heck of a lot of money. We went to Queenstown ourselves in the middle of winter, about 3 or 4 years ago, and skied for a week, and we stayed at a batch care type place, and as I said, we just did our own washing. We had meals in most nights, and we could afford the luxuries of going skiing and other bits and pieces.
Yes, certainly, and I think one of the bigger changes that I've sort of seen throughout my time with batch care is just that change in guest expectation and what owners now have to do to meet those expectations. It's rightfully so. Guests expect that when they show up, the house will be clean and as advertised in a rental ready state with things working. A sort of post-it note on the fridge saying "sorry, out of order this week" doesn't go down too well these days.
That's one of the changes in 12 years, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah. So speaking of owners, where do most of your owners come from? Are they, or more important, what's the situation of most of the owners?
Yeah, I mean, I guess our bread and butter sort of owner, I guess you could call them, is still the Kiwi owner who owns the batch. Perhaps they're finding that either their use themselves is diminishing a little bit, or perhaps their circumstances have changed and they need to get a bit of rental income from it. And that's primarily what we do, is we help owners cover the cost of holiday home ownership through renting out their properties when they're not using them. But more frequently, we're now seeing different types of owners. Obviously, New Zealand has a big expat population abroad, so we've got owners that are based in San Francisco, London, Singapore, many throughout Australia, who really enjoy, I guess, our sort of hands-off service and that full-service nature of what we do. So we arrange everything from not only the booking management, but also we can arrange property maintenance and things like that. So it gives them that hands-off solution.
So you give the full range and what you expect from a good property manager.
Yes, certainly. And I mean, I guess our owners, they stay with us often for a number of years, so we watch them go through different cycles. And we're seeing more and more owners now that are also buying second, third holiday homes for the sole purpose of renting them out as short-term investments, because they've seen the potential in their primary holiday home and have decided that they want to take that leap to look into it a bit further. Yeah,
I mean, investors out there. I mean, I've actually been sort of involved with holiday homes off and on, I guess, for quite a few years, 10 or 12 years, and seeing the use of them. Still probably not as many investors as I thought have jumped on board with them in the past. And I guess right at the moment, if you've got a 4% loan from the bank, you don't need quite as many at least night a week to cater for it.
And I mean, it's no secret that we've got a bit of a tourism boom happening here at the moment. So not only do you have strong domestic tourism, just Kiwis going away on their weekends, but you've got this influx now of international visitors. And what that does is not only are they also now looking to rent private accommodation, but they're also taking up a lot of the commercial accommodation, which forces more Kiwis out into private accommodation as well. So, and you'll see markets that would have traditionally been just winter markets. If you take maybe a Queenstown, which used to have much narrower peak seasons, are now popular 11 and a half months of the year. So when you start matching up, I guess, nightly rates versus weekly rates, long-term versus short-term, short-term becomes a very valid proposition for people.
Yeah, and all predictions now are that tourism is going to be the biggest business in New Zealand in upcoming years, so decades to come. So,
and that's why I think also holiday homes and private accommodation, there's a role to play there. But it's also important that owners that are going to take a leap into the sector realise that they are part of the tourism industry, and that the service that you give to guests is really important, because it's part of the reputation of our tourism industry, not just now Kiwis going away on their weekends and chucking a rugby ball around on the lawn.
No, that's right. In fact, just one point you said there about homes within in areas. I mean, it used to just be the touristy places as places in the middle of a town like Palmerston North or Auckland or whatever. People probably don't even think they're considered as a holiday home, but I guess they are.
I mean, if you look at Auckland, for example, I mean, Auckland in its own right is a great domestic tourism destination. I mean, many people have family and friends up in Auckland. It's frequented often, not just by international visitors as a gateway to the rest of the country, but Kiwis in general coming up to visit family for a week over school holidays, or up here for business, for an extended period of time where a hotel room might not be sufficient. So, I mean, we've got Auckland properties on our books. We've got properties in a city suburb such as Ponsonby or Herne Bay, and those perform really well. It's comparable as they would if they were in long-term rent. With the added use that the owners get the benefit of using it themselves from time to time. Located outside of Auckland.
Absolutely. What about places, like sort of a Howick or a Papatoe or something like that?
Generally we would still encourage owners in those sorts of necks of the wood to sort of weigh up their long-term options as well. I mean, obviously Auckland's quite unique in its geographic layout and traffic issues. That serviceability can become an issue too, but generally we see the strong demand for short-term primarily around those inner city suburbs. So you're talking really, I guess, like your Point Shev across to Parnell, Mission Bay, and south out to Mount Eden, Sandringham.
Right. Okay. Possibly already always covered this, but I mean, owners from overseas. Do you have many? Have you got more owners, or is it more expat Kiwis who are going? Because I get expat Kiwis ringing me and say, "Hey, Mark, I want a good property and in a good area." That's about what they want.
Yeah.
It's not always about a massive cash flow, but if how's that has that gone up or down in the last few years?
Yeah, I mean, look, as more people come through the gates, I guess there's more people that are seeing what New Zealand has to offer as a lifestyle, and all because people aren't living here today doesn't mean they don't have intentions of moving here in the future, and often renting out these properties as a way to sort of bridge the gap between purchase and settlement. We've got owners on our books that have come over here for a week trout fishing and have fallen in love with the place. They spend a month and a half here every year, and they've actually bought a property in either Turangi or down in Queenstown for the sole purpose of doing that. But they want it to give them a return while they're not here. And naturally, if you're sitting in San Francisco, it's not easy to service your own short-term rental. So that's where guys like us step in. But certainly expats as well, whether it's through inherited property or actual investment property back home. There's obviously a lot of burgeoning regions around the country, the likes of your Papamoas, Bay of Plenty. Even now Northland's kicking up again. You've got Taupo, Rotorua. Those areas now are both valid as a residential property investment, but also as a holiday property investment. So the options there for both.
Okay. So moving on to actually the nuts and bolts of how they sort of operated. And obviously, from 10 years ago, they've changed a lot from where you said you left a key under the mat and said, "Hey, clean up when you go."
That's exactly it.
So how's it work for the owner? I mean, cleaning, maintenance, even fees, and you're saying, by the sounds of it, it's almost a one-stop shop to manage your property properly, sort of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously, for any owner looking to get into short-term rentals with an investment property, your first sort of decision you've got to make is, am I going to manage this myself, or am I going to get someone in there to do it for me? I can safely say from our decade of experience that there's a bit more work to doing it yourself than what might first be anticipated. The 10 p.m. phone calls on a Saturday night during the rugby because the sky's not working on the patch would always be a good one. So, it's good to have someone looking out for that stuff. But look, I mean, our owners, we pretty much start with a gross nightly rental rate. We take 2% off for a credit card booking fee, which is often absorbed in an increase in nightly rate anyway. Our commission is 20% for all guest-related services. So that includes the full management of your listing on our site and other sites. It includes all of our guest vetting, booking confirmation, inquiry response. It includes the services of your holiday manager relating to your booking. So that's checking the property beforehand, meeting guests on arrival, and a post-stay checkout procedure as well. And then guests, obviously, they've got the option of either bringing their own linen and cleaning themselves or utilising our services of which they pay, so there's no additional cost there to owners. So really the only cost to owners outside of that is you'd want to put a little bit aside for a bit of R&M, and also if you're not going to carry out any maintenance by yourself, we charge an hourly rate to arrange that for you, as you would with a long-term investment. Yeah,
there's some listeners right now we're going, geez, that's expensive. Some will be going, that's not bad. And I know because people listen, we used to 8% sort of property management fees, and but then I also know in Picton there's a couple of apartments there that I know the people that manage it charge sort of 50%.
Oh, that's exactly it. And I'd encourage anyone that's looking into their options to consider net return, not gross return. So ultimately it's about what that 20% is of, and obviously as a company we're well across delivering owners maximum returns, and there is a lot of work that goes into managing over 100,000 guests every year, and the various needs that come with that. So possibly a little bit more hands-on with the 8% for long-term management. But
it's a big job. Clearly know. And I've seen what these people do And I mean, the biggest thing is you've got people, especially people, not only people from overseas, people from the other island of New Zealand. They've got a place, and the big thing is, hey, what do I do? How do I get these keys to these people? It's just the little things, and they try to work out things themselves, and they'll pay a cleaner up the road, and by the time they've done all this, they're better paying a professional company
exactly.
20% to do
all
it.
those little charges add up, right? And the thing is, as well, is you want to know that your guests are taken care of. So when you're not there, if something goes wrong with a water pipe burst or whatever it may be, we want to look out for the guests. So I guess the benefit of us having a large portfolio of homes is that we tend to, where possible, we can move a guest on an hour's notice or various things to make sure that their stay is not impacted as well. Yeah, which is really important.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the places get repeat clients going back to the same. They find one place they like. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got guests on our books who've rented the same property 12, 14 times. And the great thing about those tenants is they treat it like their own. There's obviously something about the property that is special to them, and they literally cherish it like they would if it was their own. So, no, we love those guests.
Okay, so it's not all about the resort places like the Taupos and the Mount Maunganui or Queenstown. There are other towns, and I know even in a place like Blenheim, where I've spent a lot of the last 20 years, there's even places right in the middle of town.
Oh, beautiful.
And they get well looked after. Are they well used?
They do. We've got actually a large handful of places in Blenheim and popular wine country, and a beautiful part of the world to visit. Yeah, I know, Picton and what have you. Obviously, there's a lot around the Marlborough Sounds, but even in the middle of town, the couple that I've seen are quite large houses, so they can cater sort of 10 people. Yeah, definitely.
And I suppose when you have a wine fest weekend or all those there's just lots going on in the summer months there.
That's exactly, And that probably touches on a bit of a point there as well about the sort of setup of the properties and the nature of how you can any one property can be set up in a number of ways depending on its purpose. So, certainly larger homes that can sleep multiple heads do really well, regardless of where
again, actually, I guess that you've got to sort of match up, what's going on in that town. For example, I suppose Blenheim in the last 5 or 6 years has got a great big complex now that can hold up to about 800 people for corporate type events for a big business, and they, because of that also, and the other facilities have great kids events for sports and stuff. So those places, I guess.
I mean, obviously, as a company, our bread and butter is groups and families, but we still cater to quite a number of couples. But like I say, if you've got your typical 3 or 4 bedroom home, it's just having a little bit of a think about what configuration you can put in, specifically with bedding, that really opens up your opportunities. So you wouldn't want to go, for example, in a 4-bedroom place and put 4 queen beds across them. Because really you're talking it's a small family or 4 couples. So we sort of always encourage, say, in a 4-bedroom situation that you'd have a couple of bedrooms of queen or king beds, split kings even if possible. A third bedroom, might be a single over double bunk. So once again, you've got either a couple of kids can go in there on the bunks, or you've got an adult couple, and the fourth room's usually the barn. So that's where you can sort of put a few extra beds in and a bit of overflow. So
sounds good. The good thing is, as I said, whether it's a 5 or bedroom or large room, just a one bedroom place in Kaiteri, where I've seen there's quite a few around there. It's something for everything.
Oh, there is.
But I suppose we're talking just beforehand, actually, speaking of larger places, or I guess most of them are, there's sort of places that would not consider to be the ideal, or you wouldn't even consider as a holiday home, and it was Awakuni sort of come up, I think. Tell us about that sort of place.
Yeah, so I guess, both from a holiday home and an investment side, I guess there's pockets around the country that's still perhaps a little bit undiscovered by a lot of people, or where perhaps there's actually quite a strong visitor demand but quite a low purchase price. Awakuni's a classic example of that. So we've got over 100 properties there now available for short-term rent, so we've got a really good idea of the market down there.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And some of them do absolutely, a lot of them do absolutely fantastically, often for a very low purchase price, and it doesn't always have to be buying the most expensive property that's going to get the best rental. It can be just a quirky little chalet with, just the right touches and a nice, well-working second-hand spa bath is sometimes all it takes to really boost those bookings. And those areas as well, I guess regionally, they're always looking at ways to boost their numbers outside of peak season as well. So they're doing a lot of work down there promoting things like the Central Rail Trail. So you are starting to get a bit of summer visitors as well. You've got Tongariro crossing. So for a part of the world where you can still very comfortably buy property sort of in the mid to late 200,000s or maybe 350 grand, there is potential in some of those areas to be doing sort of 80 to 100 nights a year at a fairly reasonable rate. so that's appealing for some people.
Yeah, definitely. Work that out, and you'll come up with a pretty good yield. You won't get in Ponsonby.
That's for sure. Yeah, maybe not today's market, but but certainly possibly. Like I say, we've got properties in Ponsonby too, and they do very well as well.
Yeah. I think well, let's move on to that. Let's talk about a couple of different areas, and I think you've got some stats here of some areas of what sort of vacancy averages. And I mean, and it's a hard question because what's the place like? Is it the best place in that area? Is it the 100th out of the 100 in Awakuni?
Yeah, that's right.
But give us some rough numbers of maybe a monthly occupancy and what sort of money they get a night. And remember, for those who don't know, if you go to a peak time in Queenstown, you might get $800 a night for one place where it might be $200 probably Queenstown's a pretty bad example.
You might not get a backpackers down there for $200.
But you get the drift, I guess. So something like a Ponsonby, for example, have you got any rough figures about?
Definitely. So I mean, like I say, we've got properties all around the country, but I guess people often don't consider short-term rental and what are traditionally long-term markets as an option. I'd put Auckland Central and I'd put Wellington into those categories. And the styles of properties vary, but there's a demand for all of them. So, if you've got a well-appointed 2-bedroom Auckland CBD property with a car park, for example, the sort of thing that might get you perhaps $600 to $700 a week long-term, you could comfortably expect if it was well photographed and it had the right amenities that you could be looking at up to 200 nights a year occupancy short-term. Because Auckland, in effect, is a virtually year-round market with just a little bit of a dip over that sort of depths of winter time, unless there's an All Blacks game on.
Yep.
So the return on that starts to get pretty appealing for what, in comparison, is quite a low entry price compared to a standalone dwelling. If you move out into the the inner city suburbs, but out of the CBD a little bit more, so I'm talking places like Parnell, Ponsonby, Herne Bay, Mount Eden. We've got 3-4 bedroom villas that comfortably do 100 to 120 nights a year. Again, it depends on, we always speak to our owners and assess what their needs are and their desires when it comes to renting to begin with. Some owners prefer a lower occupancy but a higher nightly rate for wear and tear reasons. Other owners prefer to really drive that occupancy. They don't like to see it sitting idle, so we'll be a lot sharper and more competitive on our rates on a property like that.
Right.
But certainly, I mean, there's the opportunity to earn significant returns, particularly off some of those apartment-style properties in central Auckland, and anything on the city fringe performs well.
What sort of price would you get for an apartment in the city fringe, or compared to those, say, a 4-bedroom home?
Definitely. Once again, let's take, I guess, a standard example of, say, your well-presented 3-bedroom villa in Ponsonby that you traditionally might rent out long-term at anywhere between about $900 and $1,100 a week. You can comfortably expect that you'll get in the vicinity of, depending on the time of year, sort of $400 to $700 a night or something like that, and in the vicinity of 100 to 125 nights a year rental. So once again, it depends on how you want to structure your pricing, but the returns are pretty close, and then it comes down to circumstance. Am I looking to use it a bit myself? Do I have to come to Auckland a couple of weeks a year on business? Or is there just benefit in having it not being occupied around the clock?
That's what some people, the hidden benefits with it, if they're only eating 100 nights a year, as you're saying, if you actually use it yourself for whatever the period of time, and if you're a regular and or your family use it, and save you spending $180-200 for one person in a hotel room.
And it's a bit more comfortable too, I guess. Obviously you could always look at it and say, well, I could just get some commercial accommodation, but we've got owners that are maybe Australian based that are back here for a week every month, and they just like their base. They prefer to be in their own place, and equally they like it to earn them a bit of money while they're not there.
How you said about taking photos and the way you're advertised, if you set the best photos and advertised ones will probably do better than the other. Do you assist in that if someone wants to as an extra?
Yeah, definitely. So when we set our properties up, I mean, there's something else probably, to be fair, that's changed a lot over the last few years, is that we've traditionally been quite mindful of not over-representing properties, because I guess unlike an open home situation where you're getting to site before you buy, our guests are booking solely on the basis of what they see online. So there is an expectation that you have to manage there.
The photos do lie.
The photos can lie, and you don't want to be using a wide-angle fisheye lens on a 1 metre wide by 1 metre wide lounge. That's not going to go down too well. But certainly for any properties that are in tidy or better condition, professional photos that are that are well staged, they certainly increase your return. We've had owners who have perhaps been earning $5,000-$6,000 annually off a little batch with amateur photos, and they've gone photo's photos, and next year they've done $20,000. So I sort of say to our owners that in terms of a return on investment, it can often be as straightforward as you give us a couple $100 for some photos, and we'll literally give you back $5,000. That's how important it is. It's a competitive landscape out there. So.
It isn't even advertise the property to sell. People when they're teaching the best way to, as a salesperson, to advertise, and that money shot, that one photo is the one thing that will get that attention and get the guys.
When you break it down to it, it's if you're talking say $200 or $300 for a great little set of photos, for most places it's one night a year. You're certainly going to see a positive return on that investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talking, we've said some of the good things that happen with holiday homes. Always like looking at the other side. If there's what are the possible risk of having a home? Just wondering if someone does damage to the place, if a tenant has a damage, what's if they break a light or a vase or something?
Yeah, certainly. So we take a bond on all of our bookings. It's not a huge amount. It varies on the value of the property, but generally a couple $100 per booking, and that's just there to cover sort of incidental damage or minor damage, or perhaps if the guest has chosen to self clean and it hasn't been brought up to the standard, we have to use remedial cleaning afterwards. That helps with that. Equally, we obviously have terms and conditions with guests where we've got an agreement in place in regards to damage and how we rectify that. We only take bookings via credit card. So we do have guest details on file, much like a hotel would, which makes life a lot easier than chasing someone around the country for some cash. Yeah, certainly. And obviously all the properties are checked pre and post stay, so we're pretty good at picking up on that sort of thing.
Okay. One thing that's very topical at the moment, and our last podcast, in fact, was talking about meth and P. And the guy's actually been on TV a few times in the last month, in fact, interviewing about the major problem it is throughout all industries in New Zealand. And I guess this is one that's also can be affected, just as normal property investing is. What sort of tell us about where it is in your way of thinking, or how you guys deal with it?
I mean, look, we'd be probably concerned about it as any other Kiwi in terms of how prevalent the problem's becoming. But I think, firstly, for starters, you've got to look at the sort of situation which this activity is allowed to happen. So we've got guest checks in place. We only take bookings via credit card that match the name. We meet guests on arrival. So we try and as strongly as possible put deterrents in place that are going to negate any criminal behaviour or intention of. Certainly, I think a lot of the horror stories you hear over the years tend to stem from the old situation of leave the cash under the counter and the keys under the pot, and I hope you have a great time. And no one ever lays eyes on the guests. There's no traceability, and that's certainly in those instances you're opening yourself up to the potential to have problems. But like I say, I think as a responsible industry and host, we've got great relationships with companies like Book a Batch and holiday houses as well. We're actively working with the police and other people to try and work out as an industry, how can we deter this sort of behaviour. We personally don't have a problem with it in our homes, but that's not to say that if we became complacent we wouldn't. So it's all about prevention, and the great thing now with short-term rentals is obviously health and safety requirements on properties now as well. So we'll be carrying out annual audits going forward, and that may form part of our thinking around that as well.
Yeah, as we learned listening to Miles in the last podcast, is there's so much, there's virtually no rules or regulations about this thing yet. So there's a lot to come out in the next couple of years, and that may be one of the
things. Exactly. I think it's about being proactive and about making sure that you don't make life easy for people. So, like I say, we take every step to ensure that we know who's staying in the homes, that they're aware of what our rules are, and that they're also aware that we've got property managers locally who keep a pretty close eye on things. And we obviously have the details on file. So put it this way, if you're going to embark on that sort of behaviour, there'd be easier ways to do it than through us. Absolutely. We no second times. That's for sure.
The longer sort of the conversation's going, the longer I realise the property manager becomes a pretty important person in the whole process here. They're the ones that sort of check for breakages, and I guess if something happens, you want to get them straight away. The couple of people that are just staying there. And also, as I said, checking the guests when you hand the keys to them, sort of thing. So obviously it's a bit harder if you're from overseas, but when you're looking at passing a place over to the care of you guys to look after, you can go and meet the property manager and have a chat.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, look, it depends how often you're in the neighbourhood at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The technology is a great thing these days as well, so we can get around that. I mean, we do get some owners that are adamant that they like to meet the person in charge of the property prior to coming over, and that's rightfully so. I mean, it's each to their own in terms of their comfort levels and how they see that. We've got a great network of people out there in all various areas.
Yep.
We operate in areas where, there's thousands of local residents, and we operate in areas where there might be 30 people that permanently live in a town, but they all go through the same training. And I guess the benefit of a large network is that you get to learn off each other as well. So in an industry which is still quite cottage-like and which everyone's learning a little bit every day, it helps if you're learning from a good pool of people that are experiencing the same things you are. And certainly when you touch on things like security around the homes and what to look out for with guests, that knowledge is invaluable. Being able to lean off other people.
Absolutely. So it's not someone saying, "Hey, I'll be a property manager," rocking on up.
It's certainly not a come one, come all type scenario. We're pretty picky about the sort of people that we put in charge of these assets, and they get trained accordingly. And like I say, they get brought up to speed. And every area is unique. The problems that a holiday manager, for example, might face in Arrowtown with pipes freezing on a rental is not a problem that someone may face in the Coromandel. But there might be different issues that exist here. So each area is unique, but they all operate to a nice standard sort of model, which helps us keep good service consistency across the board.
Not a bad lifestyle for some people. I know back in Picton a few years ago, there was one couple, they just went around their boat each day to different destinations.
And look, I think anyone that's got a passion for property or his own property has their own stands in that regard. So equally as much as we're sitting here talking about property investment today, if there were people out and about that thought that they might make a pretty good holiday manager, I mean, pick up the phone and give us a call and see what we can do.
Absolutely. We get people from all around the country. I know I can vouch for that. So
definitely.
Very good. Okay, that's great. It's been great. Have you got anything else you really want to finish up with, or just sort of talk about before we wrap the show up?
Yeah, I guess probably the last thing I'll just touch on is that if you are out there and you're sitting there and you're looking at what to do with a particular property, or perhaps you might have a wider portfolio and you're considering maybe testing the waters in the short-term market, just give us a call. I mean, we're always happy to offer an appraisal for a specific property. If it's sort of as generic as a 3-bed in Wanaka, it might be a bit of a how long is a piece of string type answer. But certainly, if you've got one you're looking at purchasing, or if you've got one that you already own, we're able to give you a bit of a steer on where we see that fitting and a bit more detail about what's involved in the short-term side of things. So always happy to help.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, we're just about to list this week, in fact, a place in Manukau Heads, and it's an hour and a half's drive out there, or in fact, a 13-minute boat ride from some parts of Auckland.
That's exactly it.
And it's believe me, you get there, it's an absolutely beautiful place, and I was stunned with how good the beach is.
Oh, I mean, look, we're still discovering great pockets of the country every day as well.
So someone can even stay there 50 nights a year. That's fantastic, I guess. So as you said, there's pockets like that everywhere.
There's a lot of pockets around the country where perhaps just due to local work situations, there's not a high yield on long-term stuff. The local residents just simply don't pay those prices. But international visitors that are coming for a bit of whale watching or something might be quite happy to. So I mean, certainly I'd encourage to look at those areas that have a bit of traffic from both international and domestic guests, and weigh up your options.
It'd be good to have something before the Lions tour next year.
Yeah, certainly. I'll follow that route, and I'll be watching that tour with interest as well.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. Hey, that's awesome. I really appreciate your time today, Rich. And so the best way to get hold of you is batchcare.co.nz.
Look, head online to the website batchcare.co.nz. There's a bunch of information there under the List Your Home tab. And otherwise, just pick up the phone and give us a call, 0800 42 22 42, and one of our team will have a chat.
Okay. Well, good work. Hey, appreciate your time, and all the best with Batch Care.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So, just another way for potential cash flow, maybe even capital growth on a property. Maybe something you had never thought of before, to may confirm a few points for those that may have thought about it. So, if you want to contact them, you can feel free to go there. Tell them that you heard them on the podcast, and listen in for 2 weeks' time. We've got another exciting podcast coming. Hey, have a great week.